Welcome, everybody. It's another conservation conversation. It's brilliant to have you here back again. We've been doing these for about 18 months now, and it's been just so much of a privilege to meet so many interesting people involved in music conservation and nature conservation. And today, the latter theme is what we're looking at. I'm going to be talking to somebody who's involved with a group called Working for the Wild. They're a very special, close to our hearts, and very high impact organization. They take the grassroots society, the communities in various places around the world, and get them involved with restoring ecosystems and protecting biodiversity. So this is something that's, as you know, is very important to Stornoway and informs many of our lyrics and our songs, with entire songs being dedicated to specific topics in biodiversity, such as ash dieback, which is decimating the ash tree population and the ecosystems dependent on them, and then specific songs dedicated to, say, seabirds, as just one example. And you can hear a lot of those on our album coming up in September called Beyonder. I hope you've pre-ordered your copy and come and see us on tour. But before all of that, this is going to be a delightful conversation, I'm sure, with the executive director of Working for the Wild. Please welcome Abby Gatty Irving. Hi, Abby. How are you today?
Hi, Ollie. Good, thank you. Thanks very much for having me on.
No, it's privileges all ours. It's a collaboration that I know we've been talking about for some time, since we first met at one of the Syrinx choir rehearsals. I recently caught up with Ben, who directs the Syrinx choir, and I mentioned to him how many brilliant, interesting people there are in the choir.
Yeah,
Um,
it's great. An eclectic mix of all sorts
yeah.
of people doing all sorts of amazing things. So it's really interesting.
And was that your first foray into music, or have you always been a musical person on the side of your conservation work?
Not really. A-level music stopped there, but um, but I've been in a choir that Ben has run for 10 years or something.
Right.
Long time.
Yeah.
So
Well, because we're finding the more people I talk to for this podcast, that I'm starting to realize that whilst it's common knowledge that there's this link between, say, maths and music, and science and music brains, because they've got the creativity in similar but different contrasting ways. I think there's a real pattern, especially in modern times, between people who care about biodiversity and people who care about music in a particularly heartfelt way. And it seems like the more people I meet, the more obvious this connection is. So
yeah,
perhaps you could tell us a bit about how music plays a role for you around the biodiversity efforts that you do.
I suppose. I'm not sure how it supports in a practical way, but I think just in terms of being in a choir and the collaborations that the choir's done with people like you guys and others that have tended towards a real nature theme. And so I think that's the kind of, I suppose that's the heart. One thing that becomes clear is that a lot of good initiatives, wildlife music, come from people feeling caring about things, and that's about a lot of that storytelling, and that starts off a kind of a chain of events maybe that can turn to real changes on the ground, real biodiversity changes. So I suppose it's not, I can't think of something specific, but it's more of a kind of the heart behind nature that's very connected with music, and then that leads on to caring about things. And yeah, your band is one of the main ones that does that. I mean, the even the use of birdsong, etc., was really struck a chord with so many people that I've heard since. It was really extraordinary.
Thank you. I love that you mentioned heart and caring there, because it's the kind of thing where we wake up every day full of the concerns and the stresses of the day ahead, and how do we remember that there's this whole climate emergency going on and the need for biodiversity efforts? Well, if it's in the heart, and perhaps if music can trigger a remembrance of what we care about.
Yeah, and I think
um,
it can be a positive thing, whereas you look in the news, there's so much negative, it can feel overwhelming and like nothing you can do can make much of a difference, but actually, if music can be a connector between different people doing different things, and that can, joining things together. We talk quite a lot about, as an organisation, about joining the dots in conservation, and the sum being the result being greater than the sum of the parts. So the more that people connect in those ways, and music is an amazing way to do that. One of the best ways to do that, probably.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned some of the people, and I want to name check a couple of your close team. So you've got your ambassadors, Megan McCubbin, we're all a big fan of, and I got Megan's book a couple of years ago. Gordon Buchanan, Purnima Divi Barman, those are your three ambassadors, and then a whole team of people who are helping. Could you tell us a bit about what's the most exciting project that Working for the Wild has got going on at the moment?
I suppose the biggest geographically and funding wise as well, actually, and big for us, is a project in Cameroon that is a wildlife corridor project. It's being supported by Lush, actually, which has been fantastic. They've been a great organisation for that. They're selling an elephant jelly in their shops that supports the project, and because there is forest elephants in this area, and that's a initiative that the World Land Trust have also been involved in, which sets up community-run community council-run forests on leases from the government to look after the forest, and it's to protect. It's called the Deng Deng Jar Forest Corridor. It's an important corridor in Cameroon for a lot of animals, western lowland gorillas and forest elephants. Once the whole corridor is protected, it will link together isolated populations of some some key species, and so that is a big one, and it's going to take time, but it's getting there, and it's there. It's being done like a puzzle. Each section's been done. Two forests already protected. We're just working on a third one with partners on the ground. When I say we're dependent on, we're in the UK. We're tiny, but we're dependent on. In this case, it's an organisation called Aerodef, who is a Cameroonian organisation that sets it all up, that negotiates with the government, that gets the local communities meeting with the government, establishing this, how it's going to work. The community votes among themselves who's going to run various things. They appoint rangers to protect the forest, and then they also develop sustainable livelihood projects. My favourite of which is the elephant-friendly honey, because elephants are scared of bees. And so if they put, you probably know that, actually, because I think you come from South Africa, is that right?
Well,
you
yes,
might know that. But if they put bees along the edges of the fields or the village, near the villages, the elephants don't want to go through there. So they'll do a detour, but then they can also make honey, and that can be sold as elephant-friendly honey. So just a small example. So yeah, that's a lot. That's the biggest project, and it's quite all-encompassing. A lot of sustainable livelihoods built in that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And do they have, is it all territories out there in the wider world? Are there any projects closer to home for any UK listeners that they can actually go and practically visit and see how
No, I do get asked that quite a bit, because obviously it's lovely to see things face to face, but the reality is that a lot of our projects they're picked because they're places that are not well supported either by local funding or by the bigger NGOs. So we've tended to focus on Central and West Africa. That we got, for example, one in Pemba in the DRC, which is a lesser known park in the DRC. But that's a very dangerous. Cameroon's not super safe, but Pemba is a really dangerous place to visit. So some of these places are very remote and not really suitable to visit. We have had some projects which we support in a smaller way in Europe, because there are parts of Europe where there's a lack of funding, particularly now, actually, since Ukraine, in parts of Georgia. I think the rangers there have really struggled. A lot of them worked as volunteers for a very long time because they weren't being paid, but they cared so much they just carried on working. So we have supported small things there, but they're not fixed projects, and we don't yes, so we don't have a presence in those places. We support local people and work with them to see what they want and use their knowledge to build the support that's needed, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, there isn't. I mean, I don't even go far from my kitchen very often, so where I work. So yeah, sadly, no, not yet. Maybe in time.
Okay, well, then would like to ask a bit about the role of potentially giving us insight into those specific parts of, say, the African continent. What are the different habitats that you're dealing with? Are any of them coastal and more sort of almost wetlands or salt marshy, or are they tending to be
Mm,
inland?
we've tended to support inland. They've been mostly forests, actually. Cameroon, a mixture sometimes of dry and forest. Like Senegal, actually, we sent some supported some firefighting initiatives in Senegal because of climate change. That's and overgrazing. The grasslands there are much more at risk from fire than they used to be. It's an important Sahel desert area, but not coastal there actually. But we've also got projects on. It's not just Africa, but it just happens that Central and West Africa is less supported by the larger NGOs, probably because of, I imagine, because of historic links with East Africa for the UK in particular.
Yeah, yeah,
But Peru is another project we're working with, but that's also the Lacra Pampa Forest Reserve. Yeah, we seem to, not intentionally, have headed down a forest path slightly. And then there's Panima's project, who you mentioned, who works in Assam in northern India, and we've been supporting her for a while with various parts of that initiative, which is now hopefully with some support going to be rolled out in Cambodia. But yes, wetlands is something we should probably look at. But yeah, if you go anywhere, that's the other thing, is that it's quite subjective how they're chosen in a way, because it depends on having a connection with somewhere, having somebody good on the ground who knows what's
yes,
happening, and that can, because obviously these places, they're not easy places to work. There are a lot of
yeah,
challenges, and so we need to have a really trusted partner on the ground. So we just work wherever we have those connections. One of our board members is Ian Redmond, who's I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a gorilla and elephant specialist. In fact, he's the guy I think that held the sound equipment for Attenborough when he did that years ago, that gorilla footage. And so a lot of the African connections have been through him. Small places that he's been to over the years. He's knows everybody in that field, and he's done a lot of work actually with forest elephants and their, as gardeners of the forest, and the impact they have on the biodiversity of the landscape, the way they the way they trample the ground and the way they forage, and the elephant dung. He talks a lot about elephant poo. It's one of his favorite topics, and how that improves the biodiversity of the forest, and also the carbon capture value of the forest, because
of
they
course.
trample the smaller trees. It allows some of the trees to get more mature. Those hold more carbon, and so it's quite an interesting. Yeah, I've gone on to the
Certainly.
tangent, but that's
No, no,
but
that's exactly what the conservation conversation is all about.
yeah.
I'm sure that we've discussed as a band, because we're quite a bird brain band. We love talking about avian conservation, and Brian studied that very thing for his PhD. We talked about the greater adjutant stork, which is
Yeah.
the species I believe is the focus of the Cambodia and Assam projects. So, have you seen an impact on the population of that species?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that is an amazing initiative. I think she's someone who, well, I don't know if you've come across, have you come across her
No,
person?
but
Have you
I know she
talked to her? No.
founded the Hargilla
Yeah,
Army,
she
which is a
did.
great
Yeah.
name for that.
But when she talks about how she started, she was a biologist. She is a biologist. She came from a science point of view, but that she came across the stork chicks that had tree had been cut down by farmers. I think stork chicks were sort of strewn on the ground, and she was so upset by that. Going back to the heart thing, she was so upset by that. She said, she felt she had to do something to protect these storks and others. And she said she sees them like her babies. Like, she has two children as well, but she sees them like her. And she wanted to protect them. She felt this fierce need to protect them, and so she built up. Well, actually, not that slowly. She's extraordinary. She's built up an army of 20,000 women to protect this Argilla stork through a combination of community outreach. It was a persecuted bird because it's a scavenger, and it because of human encroachment over their habitat areas, that they started to feed a lot on rubbish dumps, and they were considered dirty and a pest, and harbingers of death. I think they're sort of considered, they got a bad press basically. But actually they sort of do the reverse. They scavengers are obviously, they're needed to protect from disease, both among animals and among humans. And so she worked and drew all these women into this initiative of going out to schools and speaking to farmers and explaining why they're important and why those trees shouldn't be chopped down, and why. And they build nets under some of the nest sites, because they're quite clumsy, these storks, and they quite often knock their babies out by mistake. And so they've got these nets so they can protect, rescue them if that happens. I don't know what the numbers are in terms of there are several, huge, a lot bigger nest site areas now protected than well, it was completely unprotected before, and it was decreasing all the time. And so that wetland habitat and those nest sites are the numbers are going up. And as I say, she wants to roll that out to Cambodia, use the same model at this other area of nest sites in Cambodia. In fact, we've just done a big give campaign that finished just recently on that. So yes, I don't know the numbers, but it's been a huge success story.
Oh, that's great. Imagine if we could get the same thing for all of the other species on the red list. I know that species wouldn't have made its way into the red book, which is published just for the UK birds that are on the red list, to which Brian contributed a bit of writing. But imagine if all the 70 or so species in there, plus the Hargilla and everything else, could have its own dedicated army.
Yeah, no,
we'd live in a much more promising world.
Absolutely, yeah.
And looking ahead longer term, say 2027, any new projects coming on board that you want to get the word out to people about? Especially if there's anything we can mention around, say, funding, how people can get involved practically.
Yeah. Well, there's the Cambodia project. Also, Peru, we're continuing to support a project in Peru that protects spectacle bears, like Paddington, which is also another forest project, which is supported by very few rangers, this area of forest. They also work with local communities to try to build sustainable livelihood projects, help the communities apply for government grants and NGO grants to help them build livelihoods on the buffer zones to the parks, which is often the issue with places. It's people trying to live alongside the parks, and then the threats that are coming in from outside, illegal logging and mining, and that's the big corporate thing. So Peru is one. That and Cambodia. We don't have any others in the pipeline in the minute, but there will be probably, any day. They come in at any time. So yeah.
Well, so much going on for the team. I know on your site you've also got a dedicated page for how people can get involved and joining the team. So
we have. We've got we just had a cyclist actually cycle from John O'Groats to Land's End, through the winter, Actually, he wasn't meant to go through the winter, but he broke his ankle before he set off in the summer. So, so ended up the winter through the wettest winter we've had in a long time, haven't we? So that was quite tough going. He had to push. He I'm not advocating, by the way, that many people do this, but there are lesser sponsored things that people could do, which would be great. But he had an amazing journey because he met so many people on the way, and he camped all the way. He had his life on his back in a trailer. He ended up pushing the bike for some hundreds, about 100 or so miles at the end because everything was falling apart. But all the people he engaged with along the way was part of he raised funds, but he also had so many conversations with people about what he was doing, why he was doing it. So that's a really amazing thing to do for anyone who's got the stamina to do, a sponsored thing. Otherwise, we've got artists who, sell their art and give a percentage, or in some cases, actually Carol Barrett, who's supported us for a while. She's, in fact, that's her elephant picture behind me. She often donates paintings to be sold for projects, which is great.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll share this with a lot of artists who I think might want to contribute in a similar sort of way.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
we also want to sort of, a lot of what we do is about connectedness and trying to connect things together. Very well for birds, for example, sort of protecting cuckoos in Cameroon and protecting cuckoos here. We looking at the whole places where they visit on the way and making sure that they're protected in all those places. Otherwise, they're not going to come back to us after they've overwintered. And I think actually in the case of cuckoos, I think they're struggling in some drought sort of threatened parts of Europe on their stopping points as well. I don't know. Brian would know a lot more about this stuff, but yeah, that migratory species, it's good to look at all the different.
What was that project Chris Packham did last year, which was all about going to Cyprus and stopping the guys who had been basically poaching songbirds.
Songbirds. No, they didn't do. I mean, he and Megan are great at really sticking their neck over the parapet and standing up against that kind of wildlife crime stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
They've been saving hundreds and hundreds of thousands of birds. Quite shocking to look at that. I might share the link with people here so they can catch up on what we're referencing there. But it was quite a shocking series of clips and stills from Cyprus, where somebody was just harvesting these birds en masse to be sold.
It's shocking. Yeah.
And I think something positive has come out of that now, which should help the migratory bird counts. But yeah, here's to you guys and working for the wild and all the great efforts you're putting in. And I'm going to encourage everyone who's watching to go and get involved in supporting you.
Yeah. And the other thing actually is just to follow us on social media or sign up for our newsletter and just keep in touch, because the more everyone's talking to everyone else, the bigger the impact it has. That whole thing. Well, actually, that's another thing Panima says. It's doing a small thing. People think it doesn't make a difference, but every small, like the starfish story. The starfish on the beach story. Every small thing does make a difference. And so yeah, everyone following and seeing what everyone else is doing, and together we it feels a bit less hopeless if we work together, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Abby. It's been a real joy to talk to you and hear about all these projects. Thanks for your time. And if there's any room for more serious collaborations, I'm sure we'll meet on stage.
We're always open for that. Well, Ben, that would be great. That would be great. It was quite the night. It was really amazing.
Thank you.
You guys did a great job.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay.
All right. And thanks, everybody. If you've got follow-up questions for Abby about what they do at Working for the Wild, we can get them sent over and put you in touch. But for now, as we say, just follow them on social media and you'll be kept updated with everything they're up to. conservation
Okay.
wise. Thanks, Abby. Okay,
Right.
thanks everybody, and
Thank you.
enjoy the